The train whistle shrieked through the Montana evening like a banshee's wail, startling Zara Sommers from her fitful sleep. Her hands clutched the crumpled telegram that had brought her 3,000 miles from Boston to this desolate frontier station. "Marry Me Stop will claim your ticket Silver Creek stop March 10th stop Robert." But Robert wasn't here, and March 10th had faded into March 11th as the station clock ticked past midnight. The platform stood empty now, swept clean by the bitter March wind. Zara pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders, fighting back tears of exhaustion and despair. 22 years old, and she'd gambled everything on a mail-order marriage arrangement that had apparently fallen through. "Station's closing, miss," called the station master, a grizzled old man with sympathetic eyes. "Got nowhere to go. My fiancé was supposed to meet me," Zara replied, struggling to maintain her composure. "Perhaps he was delayed." The station master shook his head. "Last stage to Silver Creek left hours ago. Won't be another until tomorrow afternoon." "I see." Zara's voice trembled slightly as the reality of her situation sank in. Alone in a strange town with night falling and only a few dollars to her name. "The boarding house might have a room," the station master offered, but his expression suggested otherwise. "Town's busy with the cattle buyers in from Wyoming." As Zara gathered her single valise and contemplated her limited options, the station door swung open with a bang. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, hat pulled low against the wind. As he stepped into the lantern light, Zara caught her breath. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense. His face was too weathered, his jaw too stubbled, his eyes too intense. But something about him commanded attention. "Tucker Flynn," the station master called out. "What brings you to town this time of night?" The man Tucker nodded briefly at the station master before his eyes settled on Zara. "Mail run." His voice was deep, with a slight rasp that suggested he didn't use it often. This young lady was supposed to meet her intended, but he never showed, the station master explained. "Heading for Silver Creek." Tucker's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Robert Blackwell's bride," Zara's heart leapt. "You know him. Do you know where he is?" A muscle twitched in Tucker's jaw. "I know him." He hesitated, clearly weighing his next words carefully. "Madam, Robert Blackwell won't be claiming your ticket." "I don't understand," Zara said, though a cold dread was already spreading through her chest. There was trouble at the Lucky Strike Saloon 3 nights back. Blackwell accused Jim Ryder of cheating at cards. Tucker removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with dust from the trail. "Jim's quick with a gun. Blackwell wasn't," the station master cursed under his breath. "Damn fool." Zara felt the room tilt around her. The telegram in her hand, the promise of a new life, suddenly seemed like a cruel joke. "He's dead," Tucker nodded once, his expression grave but not unkind. Zara sank slowly onto the hard bench, her mind racing. No fiancé, no home, no prospects, and 3,000 miles from anything familiar. Her savings had gone to the train ticket, purchased on Robert's promise to reimburse her upon arrival. Now she was stranded with barely enough money for a night's lodging, let alone a ticket back east. "I'm sorry, miss," the station master said awkwardly, "if you need to wire someone back home." "There's no one," Zara admitted. Her parents were gone, her position as a governess filled by another when she'd left for this doomed venture. Tucker Flynn stood silently, watching her with those intense eyes. Finally, he spoke. "Silver Creek's my home range. I was heading back tonight." The station master raised his eyebrows. "In this weather, road'll be mud all the way. Been through worse." Tucker's attention remained on Zara. "I can take you there if you want. Town's small but decent. Might find work." Zara looked up at this stranger, trying to gauge his intentions. His face revealed little, but there was nothing threatening in his manner, just a straightforward offer made in a moment of need. "Why would you help me?" she asked plainly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Seems like you bought a ticket to a life that doesn't exist anymore." He gestured toward the door, toward the vast darkness beyond. "I reckon I could help you find a different one." Something about his words, or perhaps the quiet dignity with which he spoke them, steadied her. What choice did she have? Stay here with no prospects, or take a chance on this taciturn cowboy and whatever lay in Silver Creek, my wagon's out back. Tucker said, as if sensing her decision. It's not fancy, but it'll get us there. The station master looked concerned. Night travel's risky, Flynn. Especially with the lady, Tucker shrugged. Rather face the night than explain to Mrs. Peterson why I brought a single woman to her boarding house at this hour. Zara stood, gathering her valise with newfound determination. Mr. Flynn, I accept your offer, and I promise I won't be a burden. He nodded, taking her small trunk as if it weighed nothing. Never thought you would be, Miss Sommers, Zara Sommers, Miss Sommers. He tipped his hat slightly. Welcome to Montana territory. The wagon was indeed not fancy, as Tucker had warned a sturdy buckboard with a canvas covering stretched over wooden hoops. But it was clean, and Tucker had lined the bench with a wool blanket that offered some protection against the night chill. As they left the small town behind, Zara found herself stealing glances at her silent companion. His profile was strong against the starlit sky, his hands sure on the reins. What kind of man was he? And what awaited her in Silver Creek now that her intended future had vanished? How far is it? She asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. About 4 hours in good weather, Tucker replied. Might take longer tonight with the roads soft from the thaw. Zara nodded, processing this information. 4 hours alone with a stranger on the dark Montana plains. In Boston, the very thought would have been scandalous. Here, it seemed a matter of practical necessity. Did you know him well? Robert, I mean, she ventured after another long silence. Tucker kept his eyes on the trail ahead. Well enough to know you're better off. The bluntness of his assessment startled her. That's rather harsh, considering he's only just died. Truth isn't always gentle, Miss Sommers. Tucker glanced at her briefly. Blackwell had a reputation, drank too much, gambled what he didn't have, always looking for an easy path. And yet he sent for a bride, Zara murmured, the reality of her narrow escape beginning to sink in. Man like that is always convinced his luck is about to change. Tucker's voice had softened somewhat. Probably thought a Boston wife with some education might improve his standing. Zara felt her face flush with embarrassment. How naive she must seem to this man who clearly understood the harsh realities of frontier life. I suppose I should thank you for your honesty, Mr. Flynn. Tucker, he corrected her. Out here, formality doesn't last long. Tucker, she repeated, testing the name. And what do you do in Silver Creek when you're not rescuing stranded women from train stations? Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. I run cattle on a spread north of town. Nothing grand, 600 acres, 200 head, enough to keep me busy. You own your own ranch, Zara couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. 7 years now. There was quiet pride in those 3 words. Started as a hand at the Big Sky outfit when I was 16, saved every penny. Bought land nobody wanted because it was too rocky for farming. Turns out cattle don't mind rocks much. Zara found herself impressed by the simple determination in his story. And do you manage it all yourself? Got a couple of hands. Miguel's been with me from the start, best horseman in 3 territories. Took on young Billy Jenkins last spring, boys green but willing. Tucker adjusted the reins as they navigated a particularly rutted section of road. Mrs. Abernathy comes from town 3 days a week to keep the house from falling into complete disarray. It sounds established, Zara said, thinking of the governess positions she'd held in Boston, always living in someone else's home, subject to someone else's rules. Tucker made a non-committal sound. Gets lonely sometimes. The simple admission hung in the night air between them. Zara pulled her coat tighter, suddenly aware of the vast emptiness surrounding them. The stars blazed overhead with an intensity she'd never witnessed in the city, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mates. I don't know what I'll do now, she admitted, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her since learning of Robert's death. Silver Creek's small, but it's growing, Tucker said after a thoughtful pause. School teacher left last fall to get married. Town's been looking for a replacement. I was a governess in Boston, Zara said, hope sparking within her. I've taught children of various ages. Tucker nodded. That might work in your favor. Town council's desperate enough they might overlook you being from back east. Zara wasn't sure whether to be offended or amused by his assessment. Is that a significant disadvantage? A hint of a smile crossed Tucker's face. Folks out here can be suspicious of city ways. They'll warm to you once they see you're not afraid of hard work. I've never shied away from hard work, Mr. Flynn. Tucker, he reminded her. Tucker, she corrected herself. Though I admit I've never had to build a fire in a wood stove or fetch water from a well. You'll learn, he said with such simple confidence that Zara found herself believing him. They lapsed into silence again, but it was more comfortable now. The rhythmic clip-clop of the horses' hooves and the creaking of the wagon created a soothing backdrop as they made their way through the night. Despite her exhaustion and the uncertainty of her future, Zara felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. When they crested a small rise, Tucker pulled the wagon to a stop. "Why are we stopping?" Zara asked, suddenly alert. "Look," Tucker said, gesturing ahead. Zara gasped softly. Below them, the vast plains stretched out under the moonlight, silver-touched and endless. In the distance, mountains rose like sleeping giants against the star-studded sky. "This is why I stay," Tucker said quietly. Even on the hardest days, Zara understood. There was a wild beauty here that transcended words of freedom and possibility that she'd never felt in the confines of Boston society. "It's magnificent," she whispered. Tucker nodded and clicked to the horses to continue their journey. As the wagon rolled forward, Zara realized that for the first time since receiving Robert's telegram, she felt something akin to hope. The dawn was breaking when they finally approached Silver Creek, painting the sky in spectacular shades of pink and gold. Zara, who had dozed against Tucker's shoulder for the last hour of their journey, straightened with embarrassment when she realized where her head had been resting. "I'm so sorry," she said, mortified. Tucker shrugged. "You needed the rest." Silver Creek appeared before them, a single main street with wooden buildings on either side, a church steeple rising proudly at one end. It was smaller than Zara had imagined, but there was a sturdy permanence to it that she found reassuring. "Where will I stay?" she asked, the practical concerns suddenly foremost in her mind. "Mrs. Peterson runs the boarding house," Tucker replied, pointing to a 2-story clapboard building with a wide porch. "She's strict but fair. No men past the parlor, no liquor, no coming in after 9 o'clock. "That sounds perfectly reasonable," Zara said, relief evident in her voice. As they pulled up in front of the boarding house, the front door opened and a stout woman in a pristine apron emerged, arms folded across her ample bosom. "Tucker Flynn, what kind of hours are you keeping?" she called, her stern expression belied by the warmth in her voice. "Special circumstances, Mrs. Peterson." Tucker jumped down from the wagon and came around to help Zara descend. "This is Miss Zara Sommers. She arrived on yesterday's train from Boston. Mrs. Peterson's eyes widened as she took in Zara's travel-worn appearance and single valise. "You're Robert Blackwell's mail-order bride." News traveled fast in small towns, it seemed. Zara straightened her spine. "I was to be, yes. I've just learned of his passing. Mrs. Peterson's face softened with genuine sympathy. "Oh, you poor dear, what a shock that must have been." She shot Tucker a questioning look. "Found her stranded at the station," he explained. "Thought she might find work here in town, maybe teaching." Mrs. Peterson's expression brightened. "Providence, that's what this is. We've been praying for a teacher since Miss Wilson left." She bustled forward and took Zara's arm. Come in. You must be exhausted. We'll get you settled with a hot bath and breakfast, and then you can rest." Zara turned to Tucker, suddenly reluctant to part from the quiet cowboy who had rescued her from a desperate situation. "Thank you for everything," he nodded, hat in hand. "I'll speak to Mayor Donovan about the teaching position. Town council meets tomorrow." "How much do I owe you for the transportation?" Zara asked, acutely aware of her dwindling funds, something that might have been offense flashed in Tucker's eyes. "Nothing. But surely your company made the journey pass quicker," he said simply. "That's payment enough." Before Zara could respond, Mrs. Peterson was already ushering her toward the house. "Tucker Flynn, you look dead on your feet. Go home and get some sleep. Miss Sommers will be just fine here with me." Tucker replaced his hat with a nod. "Madam," as Mrs. Peterson led her into the boarding house. Zara glanced back over her shoulder to see Tucker watching her, his expression unreadable in the early morning light. Zara's first week in Silver Creek passed in a blur of new experiences and introductions. Mrs. Peterson proved to be not only a stern landlady, but also a valuable ally, introducing her to the town's prominent citizens and vouching for her character despite their brief acquaintance. The town council, desperate for a teacher, had convened a special meeting and offered Zara the position after a brief interview in which her Boston education and experience as a governess had impressed them sufficiently to overcome any reservations about her Eastern origins. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building at the edge of town, currently housing 18 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. "We can pay $20 a month," Mayor Donovan had informed her. "Not much by Eastern standards, I'm sure, but your room and board at Mrs. Peterson's will be subsidized by the town." Zara had accepted gratefully, relieved to have secured respectable employment so quickly. The alternative, returning to Boston in disgrace or seeking work in one of the town's saloons, didn't bear consideration. Of Tucker Flynn, she had seen little. Mrs. Peterson mentioned that he rarely came to town except for supplies or mail, preferring the solitude of his ranch to the growing bustle of Silver Creek. Still, Zara found her thoughts drifting to him more often than she cared to admit. There had been something compelling about his quiet strength and straightforward manner. On Sunday morning, Zara joined Mrs. Peterson for services at the white clapboard church. Dressed in her one good dress, a navy blue wool that had seen better days but still maintained a certain dignity, she felt the curious eyes of the congregation upon her as she was introduced as our new schoolteacher. After the service, as people gathered on the church steps to socialize, Zara spotted a familiar figure at the edge of the crowd. Tucker Flynn stood slightly apart, his tall frame easy to distinguish even among the other ranchers and cowboys. He'd exchanged his trail clothes for clean denims and a pressed shirt, though he looked no more comfortable for it. "Miss Sommers," he greeted her, touching the brim of his hat. "Heard you got the teaching position." "Thanks in large part to your recommendation, I understand," Zara replied. Mayor Donovan had mentioned that Tucker's good word had carried significant weight with the council. Tucker shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the acknowledgement. "Just told them what I knew, which couldn't have been much, given our brief acquaintance," Zara pointed out with a small smile. "I'm a good judge of character." His eyes met hers directly. "Have to be out here." Before Zara could respond, Mrs. Peterson appeared at her elbow. "Tucker Flynn, are you joining us for Sunday dinner?" "I've told Miss Sommers all about your ranch, and I'm sure she'd like to hear more about the territory from someone who knows it well." Tucker hesitated, and Zara found herself hoping he would accept. There was something about this taciturn cowboy that intrigued her, a depth beneath the rough exterior that she wanted to explore further. "Got chores waiting," he began, but Mrs. Peterson waved away his protest. "Nonsense. Miguel can manage for one afternoon. It's Sunday, Tucker." Even the Lord rested. A reluctant smile tugged at the corner of Tucker's mouth. "Yes, madam." Mrs. Peterson's Sunday dinner proved to be a lavish affair by frontier standards. The boarding house dining room was filled with the delicious aroma of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh baked bread. Besides Tucker, Mrs. Peterson had invited Reverend and Mrs. Clark and Dr. Thompson, the town's physician. The conversation flowed easily, with most questions directed at Zara about her background and journey west. She answered politely but briefly, uncomfortable being the center of attention. "And what made you decide to become a mail-order bride, Miss Sommers?" Mrs. Clark asked with well-meaning curiosity. "An educated young lady such as yourself must have had prospects in Boston." Zara set down her fork carefully. "My parents died of influenza 3 years ago. I supported myself as a governess, but when the children grew older, the family no longer required my services." She kept her tone matter of fact, though the memory of those desperate months still pained her. Mr. Blackwell's advertisement promised a respectable home and partnership, it seemed. Providential at the time. A sympathetic silence fell over the table. Tucker, who had remained mostly quiet throughout the meal, was watching her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "Well, the Lord works in mysterious ways," Reverend Clark said finally. What appeared to be a tragedy has brought you to us when we were in great need of a teacher. Indeed, Dr. Thompson agreed, and having someone with Eastern education will be a tremendous asset to our growing community. The conversation turned to town matters, and Zara was relieved to no longer be the focus. As the meal progressed, she found herself increasingly aware of Tucker's presence across the table. Though he spoke little when he did, others listened. There was a quiet authority about him that commanded respect without demanding it. After dinner, while Mrs. Peterson served coffee in the parlor, Zara slipped out onto the front porch, needing a moment of solitude after the social exertion of the meal. The April afternoon was mild, the sun casting long shadows across the main street. Too much company. Tucker's voice came from behind her. Zara turned, surprised to find him following her. Just needed some air. In Boston, Sunday afternoons were my only time to myself. Tucker leaned against the porch railing, his posture relaxed. Never been east of the Mississippi myself. You haven't missed much, Zara said, then immediately regretted her flippancy. That's not fair. Boston has its charms, museums, libraries, concerts. But not enough to keep you there, Tucker observed. Zara sighed, looking out at the mountains visible in the distance. I had no reason to stay, no family, few friends. My life there was circumscribed, always dependent on the goodwill of employers. And now? She considered the question seriously. Now I'm still dependent on the goodwill of others, but there seems to be more possibility here. She gestured toward the open country beyond the town, as if I'm not quite so hemmed in by expectations and proprieties. Tucker nodded as if her answer satisfied something for him. Town's lucky to have you. Those kids need more than just reading and ciphering. They need to understand there's a bigger world out there. His insight surprised her. That's exactly what I hope to show them. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of laughter from inside the boarding house. I start teaching tomorrow, Zara said finally. I must admit I'm rather nervous. You'll do fine, Tucker said with that same quiet confidence he'd shown on their journey from the station. Most of those kids are eager to learn, the ones that aren't. A slight smile crossed his face. Well, I expect you can handle them too. Your faith in my abilities is flattering if perhaps misplaced, Zara replied, though his confidence bolstered her own. I told you, good judge of character. Tucker straightened, adjusting his hat. I should be getting back to the ranch. Cattle don't feed themselves, Sunday or not, of course. Zara felt an inexplicable disappointment at his departure. Thank you for the company. Tucker hesitated, then spoke with uncharacteristic uncertainty. The spring roundup starts next week, keeps me busy for a spell, but after, maybe you'd like to see some of the country. There's a waterfall about an hour's ride from town. Pretty spot. The invitation caught Zara by surprise. Was this merely frontier hospitality or something more personal? Either way, she found herself nodding before she'd fully considered the implications. I'd like that very much. Tucker's eyes warmed. Good, I'll come by when the work eases up. As he descended the porch steps toward his waiting horse, Zara realized her heart was beating faster than usual. It was foolish, she told herself sternly. She'd barely known the man a week, and yet. Tucker, she called impulsively. He turned, one foot in the stirrup. Thank you again, for everything. He nodded once, then swung into the saddle with easy grace. Zara watched as he rode down the main street, his straight back and broad shoulders silhouetted against the afternoon sun. Only when he disappeared from view did she return to the parlor and Mrs. Peterson's curious gaze. The schoolhouse bell rang clear and bright across Silver Creek, summoning 18 children to their first day with their new teacher. Zara stood at the doorway, heart pounding but smile firmly in place as her students arrived, some eager, some wary, all curious about the lady from Boston who had come to teach them. By the end of that first week, Zara had learned all their names, assessed their vastly different educational levels, and begun to earn their trust. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying. For the first time in years, she felt she was making a genuine difference. Silver Creek, too, was beginning to feel less foreign. The shopkeepers greeted her by name, Mrs. Peterson's other boarders, two elderly sisters and a young widow named Sarah Taylor, had become pleasant companions, and even the most skeptical parents had started to warm to her after seeing their children's enthusiasm. But of Tucker Flynn, there was no sign. The spring roundup kept the ranchers and their hands busy from dawn till dusk, Mrs. Peterson explained. They'll be branding calves, mending fences, and moving the herds to summer pasture, she told Zara as they shelled peas on the back porch one evening. Won't see hide nor hair of them until the work's done. Zara told herself that her disappointment was merely the natural desire for more acquaintances in a new place. It had nothing to do with the man himself or the quiet intensity of his gaze when it rested on her. Nothing at all. April melted into May, bringing with it wildflowers that carpeted the prairie in vibrant colors. On Saturdays, Zara often walked to the edge of town, gathering bouquets to brighten her small bedroom and the schoolhouse. It was during one such excursion that she encountered Miguel, Tucker's ranch hand. "Miss Sommers," he called, tipping his hat as he rode up beside her. "The boss asked me to give you this." He handed her a folded piece of paper. Zara opened it with curious fingers to find a brief message in a strong, if somewhat unpolished, hand. "Roundup finished. We'll call at the boarding house Saturday at 2 if the offer to show you the waterfall still stands. TF. Zara felt a flush of pleasure that he had remembered. "Please tell Mr. Flynn that I look forward to it," she told Miguel. The vaquero nodded, a knowing glint in his dark eyes. "I will tell him. He will be pleased." As Miguel rode away, Zara pressed the note between the pages of the book she carried, a collection of Wordsworth's poems. It was silly to feel such anticipation over a simple excursion, she chided herself. And yet, the promise of Tucker's company and the chance to see more of this stunning country filled her with undeniable excitement. Saturday dawned clear and warm, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of sage and new grass. Zara dressed with more care than usual, selecting her best walking skirt and a shirtwaist with delicate embroidery at the collar. Mrs. Peterson watched her preparations with poorly disguised interest. "Tucker Flynn doesn't usually take an interest in social calls," she observed as Zara pinned up her hair. "Keeps to himself, that one." "It's hardly a social call," Zara protested. "Mr. Flynn is simply being neighborly, showing a newcomer the local sights." Mrs. Peterson's knowing smile suggested she thought otherwise, but she merely said, "Of course, dear. Mind your back by supper." At precisely 2 o'clock, the clatter of hooves in the street announced Tucker's arrival. Zara's heart quickened as she stepped onto the porch to greet him. The weeks of hard physical labor had honed his already lean frame, and the sun had darkened his skin to a deep bronze. But it was the genuine pleasure in his eyes when they fell on her that made Zara's breath catch. "Miss Sommers," he said, removing his hat, "you look well." "As do you, Mr. Flynn," she replied, suddenly shy. "The roundup was successful, I hope." "Can't complain," he said, which she was learning was high praise from the taciturn rancher. He gestured to the 2 horses behind him, his own sturdy bay and a gentle-looking Palomino mare. "Thought you might prefer to ride rather than take the wagon. We can see more country that way." Zara hesitated. "I should warn you that my riding experience is limited to a few lessons in Boston Common, very sedate affairs on very docile mounts." Tucker's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Willow here is about as docile as they come. Old cow pony who's seen it all. She'll take good care of you." With that reassurance, Zara allowed Tucker to help her mount. His hands were strong and sure at her waist, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Once she was settled in the saddle, he adjusted the stirrups for her comfort before mounting his own horse. "We'll take it slow," he promised as they set off down the main street, drawing curious glances from Saturday shoppers. True to his word, Tucker kept their pace leisurely as they left Silver Creek behind and headed into the rolling grasslands. He was a patient teacher, offering quiet guidance as Zara grew accustomed to Willow's steady gait. "You're a natural," he told her when she managed a confident trot across a meadow dotted with blue flax flowers. "Hardly," Zara laughed, exhilarated by the freedom of movement and the vast open spaces around them. "But Willow is indeed as gentle as promised." As they rode, Tucker pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the territory Blackfoot hunting grounds, the first cattle drives, the harsh winter of '67 that had nearly wiped out the early settlers. Zara found herself captivated not just by the tales, but by the man telling them. When he spoke of the land, a passion emerged that transformed his usually stoic demeanor. "How did you end up here?" she asked as they paused to rest the horses near a small creek. "You mentioned starting at 16, but where were you before that?" Tucker was silent for so long that Zara thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, as if carefully choosing his words. "My father was a freight hauler, ran supplies from St. Louis to Santa Fe. Mother died when I was 10. I rode with him for 5 years, learning the trails." His jaw tightened slightly. "Cholera took him in Kansas when I was 15. I drifted north, found work where I could, ended up at the Big Sky outfit." "I'm sorry about your father," Zara said softly, recognizing the shared experience of early orphanhood. Tucker nodded acknowledgement. "Made me grow up fast, taught me to rely on myself." He glanced at her with unexpected perception. "Imagine it was similar for you, losing your parents young." "Yes," Zara admitted, "though I had the dubious comfort of societal expectations to guide me, limited options but clear ones at least." "And yet you broke free of them to come west," Tucker observed. Zara smiled ruefully. "Perhaps not entirely by choice, but yes, and despite the unconventional beginning, I find I don't regret it." Something in Tucker's expression softened. "Glad to hear it." They continued their journey, the terrain gradually changing as they approached the foothills. When they crested a small rise, Zara heard the distant sound of rushing water. "Almost there," Tucker said, guiding his horse down a narrow trail that wound through a stand of ponderosa pines. The waterfall revealed itself suddenly, a 30-foot cascade of crystal water tumbling over moss-covered rocks into a clear pool below. The afternoon sun created rainbows in the spray, and wildflowers bloomed in profusion along the banks. "Oh," Zara breathed, truly awestruck. "It's magnificent." Tucker helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thought you'd appreciate it," he said, his voice low. "Not many folks know about this spot." "Thank you for sharing it with me," Zara said, genuinely touched by the gesture. They secured the horses and made their way to a flat rock beside the pool. Tucker spread a blanket he'd brought in his saddlebag and produced a small parcel of food, bread, cheese, and dried apple slices. "Not exactly Boston tea service," he said with a hint of self-consciousness. "It's perfect," Zara assured him, settling onto the blanket and breathing in the fresh, pine-scented air. "Honestly, I've never enjoyed a setting more." They ate in comfortable silence, listening to the music of the falling water and the occasional call of birds overhead. Zara found herself studying Tucker's profile when he wasn't looking, the strong lines of his jaw, the tiny scar above his right eyebrow, the way the sunlight picked out auburn highlights in his dark hair. "How are you finding the teaching?" he asked eventually, breaking the silence. "Challenging but rewarding," Zara replied. "The children are bright, if somewhat unaccustomed to formal education, and their questions?" She laughed. "Billy Thompson asked me yesterday if Boston was bigger than Silver Creek and Helena combined." Tucker smiled. "What did you tell him?" "The truth that Boston could hold Silver Creek, Helena, and half a dozen other Montana towns besides." She sighed contentedly. "But I also told him that size isn't everything. That Silver Creek has its own special qualities that Boston, for all its grandeur, can't match." "Such as?" Zara considered the question seriously. "Space, freedom, a sense that one's future isn't predetermined by accident of birth or family connections. The genuine community spirit." Mrs. Peterson told me how everyone rallied when the Winslow family lost their barn to lightning last year. Tucker nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Town's growing, but it still remembers what matters." He picked up a small stone and skipped it across the pool's surface. "Won't always be that way. Change comes whether we want it or not." "Not all change is for the worse," Zara pointed out gently. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or a shared hope. "No," he agreed. "Not all. They remained by the waterfall until the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the pool. Reluctantly, Tucker suggested they start back to ensure they reached town before dark. The return journey seemed shorter somehow, filled with easier conversation and occasional laughter. When the lights of Silver Creek appeared in the distance, Zara felt an unexpected pang of disappointment that their day was ending. As they reached the boarding house, Tucker helped her dismount, his strong hands steady at her waist. This time, Zara was acutely aware of his touch, of the warmth that radiated from him in the cooling evening air. "Thank you for today," she said, looking up at him. "It was wonderful." Tucker's expression was unreadable in the gathering dusk. "We could do it again." "There's a lake about 2 hours' ride where the trout practically jump onto your hook." Zara smiled, pleased by the invitation. "I'd like that very much." He hesitated, then reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face with surprising gentleness. "You're doing well here, Zara. The town's lucky to have you." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening chill. "Good night, Tucker," she said softly. He touched the brim of his hat, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Good night, Zara." As she watched him ride away, leading Willow behind his own mount, Zara admitted to herself what she'd been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling for the quiet rancher who had rescued her that night at the train station. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Mrs. Peterson was waiting in the parlor, pretending to knit but clearly eager for details. "Have a nice ride, dear." "Lovely," Zara replied, unable to keep the smile from her voice. "Tucker showed me the most beautiful waterfall." "Did he now?" Mrs. Peterson's needles clicked knowingly. "That's his special place. Never known him to take anyone there before." The implication in the older woman's tone was clear, but Zara was too filled with the day's memories to be embarrassed. "He's a good man, isn't he?" Mrs. Peterson's expression softened. "One of the best. Doesn't let many people see it, but there's a heart of gold under all that quiet. Just needs the right person to bring it out." She gave Zara a meaningful look. Someone with patience and understanding. Zara felt her cheeks warm but didn't deny the landlady's implied matchmaking. Instead, she excused herself to freshen up before supper, her mind filled with images of falling water, wildflowers, and Tucker's rare, transformative smile. The weeks that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Zara taught during the week, gradually winning over even her most reluctant students with her enthusiasm and genuine interest in their lives. On Saturdays, weather permitting, Tucker would appear at the boarding house, 2 horses in tow, ready to show her another piece of the Montana country he loved. They rode to the fishing lake he'd mentioned, where Tucker taught her to cast a line and cook their catch over an open fire. They explored a box canyon where ancient pictographs adorned the walls, remnants of peoples who had hunted these lands centuries before. They picnicked in meadows ablaze with wildflowers and watched eagles soar over distant peaks. With each excursion, Zara felt the connection between them deepen. Tucker remained reserved by nature, but in her company, he gradually revealed more of himself, his dreams for his ranch, his concern for the changing territory as more settlers arrived, his wry sense of humor that emerged when he was truly comfortable. For her part, Zara shared stories of her childhood in Boston, her parents' loving if conventional upbringing, her struggles after their deaths, and her secret passion for writing stories that she'd never shown anyone. "You should write about Montana," Tucker told her one afternoon as they sat beneath a cottonwood tree watching a herd of antelope in the distance. "Capture it before it changes too much." "Perhaps I will," Zara replied, touched by his encouragement. "Though I doubt anyone would publish a woman's observations of frontier life." "Then write it for yourself," Tucker said simply, "or for those who will come after, so they'll know what it was like." It was this ability to cut through pretense to the heart of matters that most drew Zara to him. That and the increasing tenderness she glimpsed in his eyes when he looked at her, a tenderness that both thrilled and frightened her, for she had no idea if he would ever act upon it. The town, of course, had noticed their regular outings. Gossip was inevitable in a community as small as Silver Creek, but for the most part, it seemed benevolent. Zara had proven herself as a dedicated teacher, and Tucker was respected, if not fully understood, by his neighbors. If eyebrows raised at their frequent companionship, no one dared comment directly to either of them. As May turned to June, and the prairie exploded with summer growth, Zara found herself counting the days between their Saturday rides with embarrassing eagerness. Tucker had become essential to her happiness in a way that both surprised and concerned her. What if he saw her merely as an interesting newcomer, a temporary diversion? What if his feelings were merely those of friendship and responsibility towards someone he'd helped in a time of need? These doubts preoccupied her as she prepared for the town's annual 4th of July celebration, a full day of festivities culminating in a dance at the newly completed town hall. As the schoolteacher, Zara was expected to help organize the children's activities and contribute to the communal dinner. "Will Tucker attend the dance?" Sarah Taylor asked as they hung bunting from the town hall rafters the day before the celebration. Zara kept her expression neutral. "I haven't asked him." Sarah, whose late husband had worked briefly at Tucker's ranch, gave her a knowing look. "He's not one for social gatherings usually, but for you, I'd wager he'll make an exception." "We're friends," Zara said carefully. "Nothing more, if you say so," Sarah replied, clearly unconvinced. She hesitated, then added, "He deserves happiness, you know, after everything." Zara paused in her decorating. "What do you mean, after everything?" Sarah looked surprised. "He hasn't told you about Emily." "No," Zara said, a cold feeling settling in her stomach. "Who is Emily?" Sarah bit her lip. "It's not my place to say if he hasn't shared it. Just be patient with him. The past leaves marks, even when the wounds have healed." Despite Zara's gentle probing, Sarah would say no more, leaving Zara with an uneasy curiosity that plagued her through the remainder of the preparations. The 4th dawned bright and hot, the celebration getting underway early to take advantage of the cooler morning hours. Children's races, a shooting contest, and a quilting display kept the townspeople entertained until the massive communal dinner at noon. Zara found herself constantly scanning the crowd for Tucker, but there was no sign of him. Miguel said Tucker had to ride to the north pasture to check on a sick calf, Mrs. Peterson informed her when she finally asked, but he promised they'd be here for the dance. The assurance should have comforted Zara, but Sarah's cryptic comments about Emily and the past kept surfacing in her mind. Who was this woman and what had happened? Had Tucker loved her, lost her? Was that why he kept a certain distance despite their growing closeness? By evening, when the musicians began tuning their instruments in the town hall and lanterns were lit for the dance, Zara had worked herself into a state of anxious anticipation. She had dressed with special care in her best dress, a blue cotton with white piping that Mrs. Peterson had helped her alter to the current fashion. Her hair was arranged in soft curls around her face, secured with her mother's silver combs. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Peterson assured her as they walked to the hall together. "Like a proper frontier lady now, not a Boston miss." Zara managed a smile, though her stomach was tied in knots. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Peterson. Your kindness has meant the world to me these past months." The older woman patted her hand. "You've brought life back to this town, Zara. And to a certain rancher of our acquaintance, though he might be too stubborn to admit it just yet." The dance was already underway when they arrived, the hall filled with music, laughter, and the stomping of boots on the wooden floor. Zara was immediately claimed for a dance by Mayor Donovan, followed by Dr. Thompson and several of the town's merchants. She participated with appropriate enthusiasm, but her eyes kept straying to the door. It was nearly 9 o'clock when Tucker finally appeared, Miguel at his side. They had clearly made an effort to dress for the occasion: clean shirts, polished boots, hair slicked back with water. But it was the intensity in Tucker's gaze as it swept the room and found her that made Zara's heart race. He made his way through the crowd toward her, nodding at acquaintances but never taking his eyes from her face. "You came," Zara said when he reached her, immediately feeling foolish for stating the obvious. "Said I would," Tucker replied, his eyes taking in her appearance with evident appreciation. "You look nice." From anyone else, such a simple compliment might have seemed underwhelming. From Tucker, it carried the weight of poetry. Thank you, she said, suddenly shy. So do you. The band struck up a waltz, and Tucker held out his hand in silent invitation. Zara placed her fingers in his, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. His hand at her waist was warm and steady as they began to move with the music. Didn't know you could dance, Zara said, pleasantly surprised by his sure steps. A hint of a smile touched his lips. My mother taught me, said a man should know how to lead a lady properly across a floor. His expression turned wistful. Didn't have much call to use it out here. They moved together with unexpected grace, finding a natural rhythm that seemed to Zara a reflection of their growing understanding of each other. When the dance ended, Tucker didn't release her hand. Could use some air, he said, gesturing toward the doors that opened onto the small porch. Too crowded in here. Zara nodded, allowing him to guide her outside. The night air was cool after the heat of the dance hall, fragrant with the scent of summer grasses and distant pines. A few other couples had sought the same respite, standing in quiet conversation along the railings. Tucker led her to a relatively private corner where a bench had been placed beneath a small tree. As they sat, Zara gathered her courage. Tucker, may I ask you something? He nodded, his expression open if wary. Who is Emily? The question clearly caught him off guard. A shadow crossed his face, and for a moment, Zara feared he would shut down completely, retreating behind the walls he'd gradually lowered in her presence. Who told you about Emily? He asked quietly. Sarah mentioned the name but wouldn't explain, Zara said. I'm sorry if it's too personal. I want to understand you better. Tucker was silent for a long moment, looking out into the darkness beyond the town. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, meant only for her ears. Emily was my wife. The simple statement hit Zara with unexpected force. Wife. Not a sweetheart or a lost love, but a wife. She waited, afraid to press further but desperate to know more. We married when I was 20, she was 18, Tucker continued, his eyes still fixed on the distant horizon. Daughter of a rancher over in Paradise Valley, sweet girl. Loved to read poetry, wanted to teach someday, like you. He paused, and Zara could see the effort it took for him to continue. We had 8 months together, then winter came early that year. Bad snowstorm caught her returning from visiting her folks. His jaw tightened. Found her wagon the next day. She tried to make it to a lined shack we had, but he shook his head. Too late. Oh, Tucker, Zara breathed, her heart aching for the young man he'd been, losing the woman he loved to the harsh realities of frontier life. I'm so sorry. It was 7 years ago, he said, as if the time should have dulled the pain. Built the ranch for her, kept building it after, seemed the only thing to do. Zara reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. Thank you for telling me. Tucker looked down at their joined hands, then finally turned to meet her eyes. Seeing you at that train station that night alone, determined, brave even when your plans had fallen apart, reminded me of her somehow. Same spirit. The comparison touched Zara deeply. Is that why you helped me? At first, maybe. His voice grew softer. But then I got to know you, Zara Sommers, not just a ghost from my past. The way he said her name made her breath catch. There was something in his expression, now a vulnerability mixed with a question, perhaps even hope. These past months, Tucker continued, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand, riding with you, showing you this country. It's been good, better than good. For me too, Zara admitted, her heart pounding. Tucker took a deep breath as if gathering his courage. That night at the station, I told you I'd buy you a life instead of the one you lost when Blackwell didn't claim your ticket. He looked directly into her eyes. Truth is, I think you've given me one instead, a life I'd stopped believing I could have. Zara couldn't speak past the emotions swelling in her throat. All she could do was squeeze his hand tighter, willing him to understand what she couldn't yet express in words. I'm not a man of fancy speech, Tucker said, his voice gaining conviction. But I know what I feel, what I want. He raised his free hand to touch her cheek gently. If it's too soon, or if you don't feel the same way, I'll understand. Silver Creek's your home now regardless. Your position is secure. Tucker, Zara finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Ask me what you really want to ask me. A smile, a real, unreserved smile that transformed his entire face, spread slowly across his features. Zara Sommers, would you consider becoming my wife? Not because you need a home or protection, but because we might build something good together." Joy bubbled up within her, as bright and clear as the mountain streams they'd discovered together. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I would." The kiss that followed was gentle at first, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened into something more profound, a promise, a beginning, a homecoming. When they finally parted, Tucker rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "Never thought I'd find this again," he murmured. Zara touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Nor I. When I came west, I was prepared to make a practical arrangement with a stranger. I never expected this, you." Tucker opened his eyes, and the love she saw there took her breath away. "You bought a ticket to one life, found another. A better one," Zara said with certainty. From inside the hall, the music swelled, and the sounds of laughter and stomping feet carried through the open doors. But on their quiet bench beneath the stars, Zara and Tucker remained wrapped in a moment of perfect understanding, two souls who had found each other against all odds in the vast wilderness of the Montana Territory. They were married in the Silver Creek Church 3 weeks later, on a perfect July morning with sunlight streaming through the simple glass windows. The entire town turned out for the occasion, the schoolteacher and the rancher having become beloved figures in the community. Zara wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Peterson and the other ladies had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Tucker, standing tall and proud at the altar in a new suit ordered from Helena, watched her walk toward him with an expression of such tender wonder that several of the town's matrons dabbed at their eyes. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with tables groaning under the weight of food contributed by every household in the area. There was music and dancing in the town square, children playing games, and enough good wishes to last a lifetime. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Tucker led his new wife to his waiting wagon, now festooned with ribbons, and a hand-painted sign declaring "Just married, courtesy of Zara's students." "Ready to see your new home, Mrs. Flynn?" he asked, helping her up to the seat. "More than ready, Mr. Flynn," she replied, her heart full to bursting. The townspeople cheered and threw rice as they drove away, heading north toward the ranch that would now be their shared home. As the sounds of celebration faded behind them, Zara leaned against Tucker's shoulder, content in a way she'd never imagined possible when she'd first stepped off that train, alone and abandoned. "No regrets?" Tucker asked softly, his arm warm around her shoulders. Zara looked up at him, at the man who had offered to buy her a life and instead had given her his heart. Not a single one. The future stretched before them like the vast Montana prairie, wide open, full of possibility, and theirs to shape together. It wasn't the life Zara had anticipated when she'd purchased her ticket east, but as Tucker's ranch came into view, silhouetted against the twilight sky, she knew with absolute certainty that it was the life she was meant to live, with the man she was meant to love.